So here's a story of how I decided to become vegan. And it's a story that I don't think really makes a lot of sense unless you experience, you were to experience these exact same things that I did inside my own head. Because I don't feel like, it's just like not it's probably I'll see by the end of it, but it's I feel like it's usually not a story that I really feel like anyone understands uh very like intuitively in the way that I do, because it just seems like such a there's just something happening very deep in my brain that's making it make sense to me, making these things make sense to me. And I know it makes sense to me, but sometimes when I try to explain it, it doesn't quite come out that well. So we'll see how well I do it this time. I think this started, well, to be completely honest, I have been sympathetic to the ideas of veganism for kind of a while. I think I started out like most people who hear about the existence of veganism and just say like, "Oh my, those guys are crazy. How could you not eat hamburgers and bacon and whatever, and cheese or whatever?" That was my first reaction, like as a little kid. I think when I was growing up, it's funny because I think that maybe that's something specific to my generation, is that we heard about like all of these different causes and things probably when we were pretty young because of the internet, and also just because it was a different time then, and so you would hear about these things maybe even just like on TV shows or something. And I heard that was my reaction, I think, probably the first time I ever heard about veganism. I couldn't date that. But as I got older, the arguments started to make sense to me. And because I liked all of that philosophy bullshit, arguments about pertaining to veganism would come up from time to time. And at first it seemed like something that was really something that's like I completely understand people that have such a strong skepticism towards it, because I think that to first encounter it, as someone who doesn't think in that way about, what they eat, and who maybe hasn't thought ever, given any kind of consideration to the idea that like eating meat is doing some kind of harm somewhere, that harm needed to happen in order to eat meat. If you've never really had that thought before, which I definitely did not have that thought independently before I ever heard of veganism, then when you're presented with these kinds of arguments, you have to, I think that to be presented with the abstract argument of veganism sounds like you're missing, like they're missing something massive in this moral calculation. It's like it's the type of thing where you want to. My experience was it was the type of thing where I would hear these arguments. I'd be like, yeah, but there must be something that you're missing. Like there must be like you're not taking some other thing into account. And then when we take that into account, then we suddenly realize, oh, it's not really that big a deal to eat meat. And the thing I thought for a while was that, you know, other animals also eat other animals, which seems pretty cut and dry when you just hear that, and it's just like, or I mean, when you just think that, it's like when you think that, it's just like, oh yeah, well we're animals, and so it's like, why should it, but then of course, I mean, the argument to that, I think, is pretty convincing. Is just that, like, we, you know hold our, if we're going to have any kind of morality at all, then we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard than animals, and we do. In fact, we don't ever use animals do something as a thing that justifies our behavior. That wouldn't make sense in any other situation other than eating meat. And if we're going to make an argument like that, then, or unless it was an argument about like something that we literally, like, biologically needed to do, which I guess, a lot of people hold that opinion, um, that we do biologically need to eat meat, which I happen to think is wrong. But I I thought about it for a while, and it's something that I think, to your ears, and if you've never really thought about it before, it does sound like there's something missing. And it's like, if you just, it's like there might be something missing here. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and don't make this like drastic decision because it just seems like this is too simple in some way. Um, I was sort of, and that's what I thought for a while, and then as I got a little bit older, I was just kind of becoming a little bit more sympathetic to it, but it wasn't like any kind of urgent need for me to become vegan or anything. Um, but I had this really intense experience for the better part of a year, and it happened after this living situation that I was in kind of fell apart. At the time, I was living with my girlfriend and someone else. The whole thing fell apart. I don't hold anything against these people. It's not, it's water under the bridge, but it was fairly unpleasant in a lot of ways. And I'm sure they would agree about that. And near the end, it was this kind of unpleasant situation, and it was made more unpleasant afterward just by the fact that, the living situation falls apart. And so then I had to go back to live with my mom in the suburb that she lives in, which I was not too happy about. It was so the whole thing was kind of this, it's kind of a bad experience. Now, or not kind of a bad experience, a really bad experience. Okay. So this is all happening, and at the same time that this is happening, the the Russian Ukrainian war was just beginning. It was during the time when Putin had all the guys like lined up on the border, and people were saying like, "Oh, nothing's gonna happen. They're not gonna do anything. It's just like a bluff or something like that." And then on one of the last nights that I was staying in my old apartment before I had to move back to my mom's house, the invasion starts. And this, like, really, really freaked me out. I remember at the time I was like watching, I was just like on, I was really addicted to Twitter at the time, much more so than I am now. And I remember like refreshing the feed over and over again and just seeing like, because there were actually, I was actually following like people who, there were some people, not a whole lot, but there were some people who actually lived in Ukraine. And it was like really, really fucked up. It was like, you know, and again, not to say that like whatever that they traumatized me or something like that. There's a really good part from that thing DFW wrote after 9/11 where he says like it would be heinous to say that their deaths traumatized me or something, because of how bad, how horrible the situation was, for the people, the people like literally dying on TV, and you're just watching it. And that's kind of how I felt. Is it's just like this is like insane. I feel like I'm going crazy, and I remember just like going, like looking at the, like sitting back and like looking at the shadows on the ceiling and just like thinking for a long time about uh, what if there was nuclear war? And I know that might sound kind of hysterical or something, and I think that, obviously it was, but I don't know. It's not. I don't think it's unrealistic to think that nuclear war could happen in our lifetimes, and in anyone's lifetime since nuclear weapons have been invented. It's kind of a miracle that nuclear war doesn't happen every second, in my opinion. So I don't think that that's really that unreasonable of a thing, even though it sounds, just to say the words, it just kind of sounds a bit ridiculous to us in some way. But for the first time in my life, I think I actually tried to reckon with the possibility of that. And of course, I think maybe why it sounds ridiculous to us is because you really can't. It's one of those things where you really can't reckon with the possibility of it. Certain things you can reckon with the possibility of that are really, really bad, you know, because there's basically a chance that you might continue on living afterwards. With nuclear war, it's kind of just like it is, there's no coming back from that, right? And so I think that trying to look down the barrel of that gun at that time kind of made me, and at the same time all of the personal things that were going on made me feel a bit like I was like going crazy. It's kind of, and this like feeling of like I started to get this very strange feeling, and it lasted for almost a year, maybe a whole year. And the feeling is the hardest thing to explain, because I can tell you for certain that it didn't continue. I don't feel it right now, and I would feel it if it happened again. And it's just kind of like this whole body and brain sensation that, like, I don't know, you're feeling you know, I've thought about a few things since it happened. I've thought about that maybe this is like some kind of like bodily induced psychedelic experience, or that's what it was, or something like that. Because, it's like people say that about psychedelic drugs, is that like the drug will induce this experience for you, but it's like it's possible to have an experience like this, without using drugs. It's just like your body is just capable of like doing this in some way. And so I've thought that maybe it was something like that where I experienced this kind of bodily induced like psychedelic experience or something like that. And I've also thought about this really weird thing. I read about this phenomenon that astronauts have that's called like the overview effect, where they look back on Earth or something like that. They look back on Earth and they suddenly get this feeling of like interconnectedness with everything, and they feel like this intense like draw toward humanity and the Earth. I felt I know it sounds like really funny, but or like weird, but I felt or maybe just like unbelievable, but I just felt like some kind of small version of that. And it was connected to that, to these like thoughts about nuclear war. And I remember just thinking like, just like taking these really, really long walks. And that was the other thing, is like this, the suburbs are just so, I mean, I don't know about other ones, but the one where my mom lives is just so desolate. Like I would just go on these long, long walks outside. I'd just be the only person out there. And I'd just be thinking about this like constantly. And I remember just having this, just feeling like the whole the whole world is like built to commit suicide. Like right now, like everything that we're doing is just, it's like everything that everyone does every day is just kind of building the gun that we're going to use to kill ourselves or something. I just kept thinking stuff like this just constantly. And this is the part that's a little hard to explain if you're not in my head at the same time. But what I ended up thinking, and it has to do with that overview effect thing, is that feeling of interconnectedness is what led me to conclude that I really, really needed to become vegan. That I really needed to stop eating animals. Because the thing about it, to go back to what I was saying before about like hearing the arguments for veganism and then thinking like, yeah, that makes sense, but there must be something you're missing. It's like, no, it's like I was actually missing something. I was actually missing something when I thought that. Because what I was missing was just the simple fact of life that like a factory farm is like a poison machine. It's like a thing that we make that just like sprays poison into the world and just is just this constant motor of death. And the machine just exists to not only to poison us, but to just, it's just like this murder machine of, murdering like families of these animals, like murdering little, you know, calves and putting like chicks into like the hatched chicks, they like put them into this meat grinder, and it's just like this constant thing, and we're just doing it constantly. We maintain it constantly, like everybody does. And that's just kind of the way everything works. It's just like that's how imperialism works too, except the meat grinder is, people. And that's how globalization works too, except the meat grinder is, it's like people that are basically slaves to American corporations that work for like pennies a day in textile factories in Bangladesh, or, like harvesting coffee and cocoa beans in like Latin America or something. It's just like the whole thing is just like the suicide machine. And that's what I felt like. I can't, and I still feel like that. It hasn't. I mean, the physical feeling has dissipated, but the, I mean, the sense in which that's true hasn't dissipated at all. That still seems to be the case to me. And yes, I know, meat that comes from meat that you buy in a supermarket isn't literally poison. It's not going to kill you. In fact, it's probably fine, if you cook it. But what I mean by poison is just, if you look up like factory farm pollution and things like that, and like the what they do with the waste at these places is um, like they literally just like spray it out into the environment. It's like, I mean, factory farms are some of the worst things that like human beings have ever created. Really, it's pretty horrible. It's pretty horrible to really even think about. But all of it is, all of it is. And I don't know how, I don't believe that I can stop it with my individual choices. But I do feel the need to act on this belief. And, you know, actions actions start small, and maybe sometimes they stay small, and maybe there's nothing anybody can do. But it seems important to at least try to act and to begin somewhere about a lot of these things.